Colleagues, I wanted to mention today, speaking of some law that's already settled, today is Trans Day of Visibility, and this is a day that's meant to affirm something very simple, which is that transgender people exist. They always have. They are part of our communities. They are important leaders in our communities, and they deserve to be able to live here with safety, dignity, and freedom. But instead of that affirmation, one of the first news alerts I got this morning was a very different message from our United States Supreme Court that forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the moment that we're currently living in this country. This is from the New York Times, and there was also a great story about it in Washington Post and the AP, but this morning the Supreme Court struck down Colorado's law banning conversion therapy for minors, which is a law that was passed in 2019, which is the same year that I introduced legislation here in Nebraska for the first time that was very similar to what Colorado passed to ban the practice of conversion therapy here in our state. That law was designed with a very clear purpose: to protect young people from a practice that all major medical organizations have long warned is coercive, ineffective, harmful, and yet the court has now said that those of us in the LGBTQ+ community can't even have that basic protection. So on this day of trans visibility, we have to sit with that reality. On a day that's meant to celebrate visibility, instead we're confronted with vulnerability and a lack of safety. In 2019, when I introduced that bill to ban conversion therapy in Nebraska, it was part of a broader movement across the country. A lot of states were stepping forward. A lot of legislatures were recognizing that protecting young people across our country was not controversial. It was responsible governance, and it was in line with best practices from all major medical leaders. Today, conversion therapy is banned in 28 countries, including Canada, France, New Zealand, Germany, Malta, Brazil, Spain, Australia, many, many, many others. It's also banned in 23 states. But after all of this, years later, I never imagined that we would not only still be fighting this battle, but that we would be behind where we started, that we've backslid, that we've lost rights. And I also want to say something about the framing of this decision from the Supreme Court. The court has framed this as an issue of speech, as if what's at stake here is the right of a professional to say certain things in a therapeutic setting, that it's a free speech issue. This is an argument that I know well, because this has always come up in opposition to bans on conversion therapy that we've had. But we do regulate licensed professionals. We do that all the time. We regulate doctors, we regulate lawyers, we regulate all healthcare professionals, not to suppress ideas, but to protect people from harm. When a licensed professional is practicing care, their words in that case aren't just speech. They aren't just speaking into the ether. They aren't just sharing an opinion. They are part of the treatment itself, and states have long regulated that. Speech in the quote-unquote marketplace of ideas is different from speech inside a medical setting, where patients rely on expertise and standards and trust, and regulating professional conduct, regulating the speech that medical professionals use in the course of treatment to their patients. It's not the same thing as censoring ideas. I see my light's on, so I'm going to push my light one more time so I can finish these thoughts. Regulating this type of speech is not the same thing as censoring ideas. It's not censorship. It's about setting boundaries for what licensed professionals can do to patients under the law. I read Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent, and it was really, really good. And what she pointed out was that medical patients are not consumers of competing ideas. They're not, listening to opinions and coming up with their own idea. They are people seeking safe and effective care for their health. States don't regulate medicine in order to suppress viewpoints. They regulate it to enforce standards of care based on evidence and professional consensus, even if those standards reflect a particular understanding of what's safe and effective.
You're next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. President. We don't allow doctors to prescribe a treatment shown to be ineffective or dangerous. And we don't say that professional standards are an infringement on speech. When we know what the standard of care is for a knee replacement, if a doctor doesn't want to provide that standard of care, we don't say, well, that's their free speech, that's their right to do it. We consider adherence to the standard of care as part of the responsibility that comes with having a license and serving the public. And again, I want to bring us back to Nebraska and back to 2019. We had an opportunity to act and say that young people in our state deserve protection from practices that attempt to change who they are at their core. And we had the opportunity to align ourselves and our law in this state with what many, the majority, in the medical and mental health community have already recognized. And a lot of people forget that we actually came really, really, really close. The hearing at the time was in the Warner Chamber because the Judiciary Committee room wasn't open at the time. The committee members were sitting up on the dais of the chamber, and the room was packed. There was almost a fight. Senator Wayne could tell you about that. Somebody stepped to me a little bit, and Senator Wayne shot out of his chair so fast, ready to, come tussle if need be. And I felt that the members of the committee in 2019 were convinced. It didn't end up getting a priority for whatever reason, but I think about really how close we came. And I always think about our responsibility in here to carefully think about the institution that we want to be. Are we going to follow the political shifts in the national landscape, even when they move away from protecting vulnerable people, even when they move away from what we know is the standard of care? Or are we going to hold to the principles that guided us when we were closer to getting this right? Because I think our job is not just to mirror the moment. It's not just to reflect what the president's saying or reflect what they're saying on the news or whatever the political spirit is in the moment. It's to exercise judgment and recognize harm, even if it's politically inconvenient to name that harm. And it's to protect people, especially those of us who face the most marginalization. And that's why this is relevant to this bill here today. I think we have to remember that the people who are most affected by our decisions are often the ones with the least power to influence them. And that's something I think we forget a lot. So today, thank you. Today on Trans Day of Visibility, I just want us to sit with that. And I want to say to the trans people of Nebraska, I think that you should put your safety above everything else, especially in this state right now. If you know who you are on the inside, you have already done the hard work and self-examination that many people never do, and you should be very proud of that. What I know is that visibility without protection is not enough. It's nothing. What is it to be visible if when you're visible, people, try to remove your medical care, try to kick you out of your job, try to tell you what bathroom you're allowed to use? What's visibility then? What's that good for? Being seen does not mean being safe. And being acknowledged by a politician like me, it doesn't mean you're being supported either. I think that all of us should have the goal, whether we understand it or not, whether we quote unquote agree with it or not, to improve the lives of all Nebraskans and reduce suffering as much as possible. So when I think back to 2019, and I think back to what happened in Colorado, which the Supreme Court has now sadly undone, and who knows what ramifications this is going to have for the rest of the country, and who knows what ramifications this is going to have for health care in our country, if now anything a doctor says is protected speech, and there's no longer any kind of legal reason for them to tell the truth about the care that they're recommending. But what I think about when I remember the time and the spirit we were living in when we almost did it, we got really, really close, is that progress is not inevitable, but neither is regression permanent. And it's all going to come back around, so that's what we keep fighting for. Thank you, Mr. President.